I remember as dietitians, we would, anytime anybody would mention the Atkins diet, we'd be like, oh, the Atkins diet. No, don't go there. You know, if we had like a client come in and say, or a patient say, oh, I'm trying this Atkins, we're like, no, you don't do it. Like maybe a couple weeks, but don't do that long term. And then meanwhile, a client or a patient would come in and be like, hey, I found this fat-free Cool Whip. It doesn't have, it has less than 1 gram of fat in it. So I'm like having it for my dessert. And we're like, hey, cool. Where did you get it? Let me go get that. And, I was eating, like you said, Twizzlers was one of my favorite. Pretzels, crappy, no-fat pretzels,
Yep.
Diet Coke. And then I would eat like cherry and apple pie filling out of the can because it was fat-free. So we thought that was
Yeah.
healthy as dietitians, even though we had been taught in school about biochemistry and the substrates that you need, but we weren't taught a lot about like hormonal health. We weren't. We were taught a lot about like energy, like how to burn energy, what are the substrates you need, what did the different vitamins and minerals, but we did not learn barely anything other than what you learn in human physiology, what
Well,
your hormones are doing, how they talk to each other, and how your food and intake affect those, like virtually zero.
and it's shocking to people, Shanna, when I tell them medical doctors did not get that training either. You would think at least nutritionists and dietitians would have some semblance of kind of the mechanisticness of the hormonal effect, the whole endocrine system, and understanding, okay, when you have this, it's going to impact this system, and it all leads from insulin on down to all your hormones and everything. None of that. And doctors, no, them neither. So like, this is a brokenness in the system, both the nutrition, the people being schooled in dietetics like you, and people being schooled in medicine like doctors and PAs and even nurses on down the line. It's no question in my mind how we got into the real pandemics that are out there, which is heart disease, diabetes, obesity. I could go on down the list of all these things that, but for the education being messed up at the beginning, you could actually prevent a lot of these things. Because if you understood insulin resistance, if you understood, well, this food will impact this hormone and will impact this in your health over time, like if we could get doctors, dietitians, and everyone else talking about this all on the same page, we wouldn't have these issues anymore.
Right. And the problem is, like, even if we did learn it in schooling, which we didn't, like I said, whatever I learned in human physiology, the basic human physiology in the endocrine system, that's what we learned. But even so, once you get out into the dietetics field and you start seeing patients, you have a folder with handouts for this disease state. And then if, like say diabetes, you give them this education. If they have heart disease, you give them this education. And it's all coming down from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics.
Yeah.
And that system is flawed. And we're told, like, everybody's under this umbrella term. If they have this disease state, this is how you treat them with nutrition therapy. You don't look at them individually. And then, holy crap, if there's more than one disease state, then it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to restrict this and this and this and this. And it's just like not asking questions about what foods do you react to? What makes you feel well? No, it's like, okay, you have heart disease. This is how I'm going to educate you. And you went down the line of the bullet points and you sent them on their merry way. And then you wondered why they didn't lose weight and get better.
See, to me, that's no way to treat a patient, a client. Like, we are individualistic. Like, look at the patient, look at their eyes, like hear them talk, or in your case, the client, hear what they crave, hear what they say, because it gives you clues. And it's so much more than just treating people like lemmings, which is what the Dietary Guidelines for Americans has done to us since 1980. And let's not get started on how flawed those were from the very beginning. Like, all this research, Shanna, on sugar was being squelched, and then all this negative research, positive research, or about saying how bad sugar was for you, and then all this positive research on saturated fat specifically being benign in your health. Oh no, we can't have that out there. We need to make sugar look good, fat look bad. And then it got taken all the way to policy now, which we just had the new dietary guidelines for 2020 come out. and it's not that much different than the original 40 years ago.
Super disappointing. I was so disappointed, and that's why I scan them and I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. The saturated fat is still limited. The added sugar, I think, went down by a tad.
Yeah, but added sugar, nobody even knows what added sugar.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. It's like we're not focused in on what nutrients and what nutrition we actually need. There's nothing on there that talks about bioavailability or how well you absorb different foods, plant foods versus animal foods, because the bioavailability in animal foods is so much higher than
Yes.
plant foods, but nothing. I mean, there's nothing. It's just these very, not random's not the word I'm looking for, but just very basic.
Well, propagandist is what I would say, because it's all these talking points that serve the pharmaceutical companies and the food companies the best. The first 3 words of that should have said, eat real food. That should always be the basis of any good diet. And if we're going to make recommendations to people, that should be in big block letters at the top of the recommendations. Eat real food. And then from there, okay, maybe give some people options. That's kind of my thinking is, why do we have to have such a monolithic look at dietary guidelines? It's like, we're not monolith. Like, your metabolism is far different than mine. And I know you asked about fasting, and we'll get back to that in a minute, but this is so fascinating. This is the fun part of doing a crossover episode. We both have so many things we want to ask each other. So, but right. Like this dietary guidelines thing, that it needs to get apart from the USDA, because the USDA is the United States Department of Agriculture. So I wonder what they're going to push on people. No wonder we have healthy whole grains. They were never healthy, but that's the vernacular that's out there. And vilifying fat makes you eat more grains and eat more sugar and eat more all of these foods that we know are very profitable commodities. And so if they can make a profit off of you eating these foods that they know aren't healthy for you, and yet under the guise of them being healthy for you, there's no bigger ruse that's ever been put on America.
Right. And another one of the guidelines is limit processed foods. It's like, well, what does that mean? Limit that to what? Like, what limit processed foods to me is very different than my sister or whoever it is looking at that. And then if we're going, this is a whole nother topic, but the all foods in moderation approach, it's like, well, what is moderation? Because moderation for me is maybe one Diet Coke every 3 months, where moderation for the next person might be, if you were addicted to Coke, going from 12 Cokes to 3 Cokes a day. It's like, well, that's not moderate. Yeah. It is for you, but it's still not a healthy approach, and it's still not going to heal your underlying issues. So that's where I take, like, the whole food in moderation thing has got to go as well, because it's not individualized, and it's just very simplistic, and there's no finite anything to any part of it.
Moderation is an excuse to continue your addiction.
Exactly.
I'm really convinced. They say eat in moderation, just don't eat too many. And also, we're on so many hot topics we did not get yesterday. Also, the calorie thing is the same way. The only reason they focus so hyper on calories, and I know it was big in your dietetics teaching, is because when you talk about calories, you remove all the hormonal effects of that food. 1,000 calories of a ribeye steak is far different than 1,000 calories of Coca-Cola. And yet, in the eyes of calories, they're equivalent.
Absolutely. And that's what we were taught. That's what I taught in my first job. Calories are the power. As long as you're under this amount of calories, you will lose weight. And of course, we went into the whole food guide pyramid, eat this many servings of this and this and this, but the protein and the fat were at the top. And of course, we were teaching people to eat seed oils at that point in time, the inflammatory, eat your corn and your canola. And we were also teaching olive oil, which is more moderate, but it was craziness. So let's get back to your extended fast and fasting and day 5. That is admirable. The longest fast I've done is 3 days. So I know you've been at this for a long time, and I don't want our listeners to be like, holy moly, like 5 days, that's a long time. But at the same time, it's very interesting to hear from someone who's done a lot of long fasts to tell us, like, they're not all the same. Like, some you're going to just fly right through, and some are going to be a huge challenge. So yeah, tell us about your kind of your fasting background and your extended fast that you're on right now.
Yeah, so I used to refer to a fast as the other F word because it is a 4-letter F word. Literally,
Yes,
it's a
it
4.
is.
And so I remember it was back in 2008, maybe 7, when I interviewed on this show, the Live and La Vida Low Carb show, Dr. Michael Eads. He wrote a book called Protein Power with his wife, Dr. Mary Dan Eads, and he mentioned in there about IF. He said, if you just implement IF with low carb eating, that's a very effective strategy for fat loss, and da 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 da. He was giving all the benefits. And I'm like, what is if? What if? What? He said, oh, intermittent fasting, and I was like, I heard starvation when he said that phrase.
And this is 13 years ago. Like, now almost everybody has at least heard of intermittent fasting, but
Yeah.
it was not a thing then.
It was kind of a thing. There was this guy named Brad Pilon, had a book called Eat, Stop, Eat. I interviewed him on this show. And there were several other fasting-ish people out there, definitely all intermittent, none of them these long fasts. And so a couple of years after I interviewed Mike Eads, I had a cancer researcher, Dr. Thomas Seyfried out of Boston College, on my show. So this would have been about 2008-9. And I was interviewing him about ketogenic diets and cancer and da-da-da. And at the end of the interview, I was like wrapping up. And he said, if you want to prevent cancer, once a year, go on a 7 to 10 day water fast. He said distilled water, but I think you need some minerals in there as well. But he said at the time, distilled water fast, and you'll prevent cancer if you do that once a year, 7 to 10 days. I was just like, you're kind of new to podcasting. You're going to hear things from a guest that you go, whoa, that was profound. And I was just like dumbfounded for like 3 seconds. I was like, so that's all the time we have today for Living to Be Loved. I didn't know what to say because it was just so profound, but it stuck with me to the point that I reached out to Dr. Seyfried after, and I said, I want to try that. I've never done more than maybe 36 hours of fasting, 24 or 36. And I said, I want to try it. So I jumped from doing these kind of intermittent fasting, because I dabbled with it once Mike put it on my radar screen, and I didn't like it, but I was like, all right, I'll figure it out. And I was always tinkering. And this is the lesson for your listeners. Always kind of tinker with things. Don't get intimidated that Jimmy Moore's doing a 7-day fast right now, maybe longer. I've done 3 21-day fasts. Don't think, oh my gosh, 21, I could never do that. I didn't jump to 21 on day 1. I started with, it's an F word. It sucks. No. And then I went, okay, I can do 12 hours. I can sleep and then kind of extend the fast a little longer to 12 hours. Okay, then, I can do 2 meals in a day and eat within like a window, 6 to 8 hour window. I could eat 1 meal a day and do OMAD. Now I'm feeling more comfortable. And like right now, I'm finishing up day 5, about to enter day 6 of my goal of at least 7 days. And so you work your way up. It's like a muscle. You almost kind of like flex that muscle, and you're building that muscle, and you go a little bit more. I'm setting new PRs every time that I fast, because you just build upon the last time. If you went 72 hours last time, build it. Try to do 5 days this time. If you do 5 days, try to do 7 days. Now, let me put something out there. I don't think everybody needs to extend fast. That's for people that are trying to enhance brain health. You can get most of the autophagy benefits from a 3-day fast every once in a while. You don't need to do it every week. Don't do it every week, month. Maybe once a quarter, like a 3 to 7 day fast is probably good. Is that what you recommend?
Yeah, that's what I was doing them quarterly. And then as we talked yesterday, like 2020, I didn't do, I think I did a couple 2-day fasts.
Yes.
But yeah. I have a
2020.
3-day one on my radar again in the next couple,
Yeah.
at least 3 days, and I'll see if I can keep going. But it's always nice to pull people from my support group, because they always will do them with me.
Yeah.
And that's always great.
That's why I do the public one. So right now I'm leading it on Clubhouse and Instagram, a public 7-day fast. And I've had people reach out, oh my gosh, I never thought about fasting. This is exciting, because they love the vibe of a community doing it together, which is why I love doing them. I tried to do one of these in 2020, by the way. By the way, 2020 is forever going to be a cuss